Hello, welcome to our podcast. Today, our topic is going to be about the unethical practices in journalism. I'm your co-host, Issa.
And I'm your host, Lynn. It's good to be back. So I understand we're going to be delving into some pretty hefty topics today.
Yep, hefty and relevant. Do you want to start off with the definition, what we define unethical journalism as?
Yeah, it's the deliberate presentation of evidence or news in various sources of media, say, online news, articles, newspapers, in an effort to, mislead the public.
Mm-hmm.
So first, we're going to delve into some of the ethics of journalism. Now, as I can understand, most journalists, I don't know if it is exactly a rule, but they are expected not to engage in political activities such as contributing money, campaigning, lobbying, or running for office. There's this quote that I read that credibility is the heart of journalism. Now, this means that journalists are accountable for all they write. And this can be pretty difficult.
Today we'll have 3 examples from journalists in history who have violated the credibility aspect of journalism. First, we're going to do a case study on a journalist named Stephen Glass. He worked for the New Republic and was known for his articles and stories that contained really unique details about various businesses. It says, of the 41 articles written throughout his career, 27 of them contained false, exaggerated info.
Jeez,
so he basically lied.
That's a lot of articles.
That is. It's like half.
Oh my god. Yeah.
It says here, the reason Glass was always inspired to write stories that would interest and satisfy his readers. So he lied about certain facts in his stories, which eventually increased over time. This goal was more important to him than providing his readers with the truth. What do you think about that?
That is everything journalism is against. He's literally changing the story to make it more interesting instead of presenting the facts.
There are plenty of examples of that too in media today, with news focusing on maybe the violent aspects to make it more flashy and interesting.
Draw more attention, views, rather than tell what's actually happening.
Exactly, yeah, just to catch people's attention. A second case study is about a journalist named Jason Blair. So his story is that his articles became popular nationwide while he was working for the New York Times, and it led him towards promotion in the journalism field. However, it was known that his writing contained many errors, and upon further analysis of this, it was discovered that 36 of the 73 articles written by him contained false accounts of individuals, statements, and locations.
Jeez.
So
that's not... Oh my god, that's not quite as many as the previous guy, but...
So,
yeah.
It says his reason that when he first started writing, he decided to alter the truth a little bit, but this soon became a staple in his writing style. While he started the changing of small details, it escalated to a point where he was creating a whole new story entirely.
Sounds like this man should have gotten a career in fictional writing rather than journalism.
I agree. He probably could have gotten more awards that he deserved.
Yeah.
And then the last case study is a journalist named Janet Cook. So Janet Cook, for the Washington Post, won the 1981 Pulitzer Prize for the first article she wrote titled Jimmy's World. The article was about an 8-year-old boy who struggled with an addiction to heroin, a story that touched many people emotionally and led them desperate to know more. As the story began to be further investigated, Janet Cook soon admitted this story was dishonest and the boy from her article did not exist.
Wait, what?
The boy from her article didn't exist. Wait, she won a Pulitzer Prize for an article about someone that didn't exist. This is also creative writing.
Oh my god. Again, I feel like all of these people should have made a career in writing fiction.
Janet Cook did not write this story with the intention to receive the honorable prize, once it was recognized for it. Her desperation to flourish in her field at an early age drove her to write this intriguing story so her work would be recognized. So I guess she wanted to be recognized, but not necessarily receive, like, the Pulitzer Prize for it.
Yeah. It's kind of like maybe a desire for personal fame kind of overtook what professional integrity she had.
I agree. All of these journalists, the one common trait they had is just they're all doing it for their own desires.
And of course, there are probably many more accounts that we have not touched upon. And I
True.
think it's safe to say that we've all been exposed to some form of unethical journalism or just misleading news in our life.
Are there policies that we should enact to regulate journalism so that we can depend on it as credible, reliable sources? What's your stance?
Oh, geez. I definitely think there should be some form of regulation put in place. Free speech is a pretty major aspect in our country.
Freedom of the press as well. Freedom of the press is something like very American Western ideal that not a lot of countries even have.
What are regulations we could put in place that wouldn't help have that kind of downward slide into oppressing those rights?
My first thought, I guess, is the editing process. Journalists have to turn in their article to an editor of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
And while an editor doesn't necessarily strictly fact check, hopefully that they'd be able to recognize if anything seems a bit far-fetched or have the right to ask, what is your citation of this? Where is your source?
Or maybe creating like a committee that's specifically supposed to kind of like fact-checked articles or something like that. Would that be too much to ask? It's a delicate line we'd be walking.
Yeah, definitely is really fragile.
Journalism has become something that's not quite as profitable as it used to be. And I guess one reason we can attribute for that is that the spread of false information seems to be kind of the main cause of this. Journalism has been taken over by this point of where people want more views, they want high ratings, they want money, they want attention, rather than creating actual new content about real life situations. Kind of terrifying just how massive this has an impact on the general population.
Here's some questions worth asking. Is social media to blame possibly for this like sudden desire in news with how competitive it is with other things trying to grab people's attention to just make things more flashy?
Well, I know one thing is that the rise of the internet age has made it much, much more difficult for paper newspapers to stay in business. And because the internet is so vast and wide, we have multiple sources of news, and there are so many that it's almost impossible to fact check them all. It says in Washington state, there's a council made up of citizens and journalists that hear about public complaints and state media over council hearings and findings. Guide journalists so they can keep their credibility, their role, but it doesn't really say how much the public really has. Does the public really have an influence on the credibility of journalists?
Yeah. And at what point do journalists let public opinion sway how they say the truth or say what they think is the truth?
So in the short 10 minutes, we've talked about 3 real-life examples of unethical journalists and how it seems that there aren't really very many laws or regulations in place to prevent such incidents from occurring.
I guess it just brings into question for the future and critiques how much we should regulate and make journalism accountable. Is it okay to have freedom of the press if it means our sources are unreliable? Wrapping up, I'm your co-host, Issa.
And I'm your host, Lynn.
And have a good evening.
Stories and research were provided by Daniela, Sophia, Issa, and Lynn. Script editing by Sophia, Gabe, and Daniela. Directing, recording, and editing by Gabe. Music and transcript provided by George.